Coming up on This Week in Radio Tech, did you ever wonder where audio over IP came from? What was the genesis? What were some of the behind-the-scenes stories of how AoIP came to be? Well, we've got as our guest a guy who was right there, right with Steve Church and developers from the University of Riga in Riga, Latvia, and they were all coming up with audio over IP to be branded as Livewire back almost 25 years ago. We got that story with Mike Dosch coming up next on TWiRT.
This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Broadcasters General Store with outstanding service, savings, and support. Online at bgs.cc. By Broadcast Bionics with the Bionic Studio, including talk show control, social media, and visual radio. Broadcast Bionics brings exceptional audience engagement to radio and TV. By Air, featuring Playout One radio automation software, comprehensive streaming solutions, website content management, and social media tools for maximum listener engagement on the web at AIIR.com. By Angry Audio. Audio problems disappear when you get angry at angryaudio.com. And by Max Connect Wireless, prioritized high-speed internet service designed for transmitter sites and remote broadcasts.
Hey, welcome into This Week in Radio Tech, the show where we talk about everything from the microphone to that light bulb from the top of the tower. Hi, I'm Kirk Harnack here in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. So glad that you could join us. It's our 772nd, a little hard to say, episode of This Week in Radio Tech, doing this for 16 years, and delighted that you're along with us. We're going to have a fun show today because we're going to rewind and learn a little history and see how it affects the engineering that we do today. It is a rainy, rainy day here in Nashville today. And Chris Tarr is he is checking out some new policies and technologies and responsibilities at his new job. So I hope we get to talk to him again real soon. But he is really busy today. But that's okay. In the meantime, we have a guest. And our guest is so full of information, you are just not going to believe it. Get ready, because we're about to open the fire hose and deliver stories and information and some great history that will lead us right into the things that we use today in our broadcast facilities. All right, so let's bring in our guest. Say hello. Hi, Mike Dosch. We're going to call him Catfish. Mike Dosch is here, owner of Angry Audio. Mike, welcome in.
Hello, Kirk. Thanks for inviting me. And we're gonna have all kinds of stories and things to talk about, and hopefully they're entertaining.
You know, most of the audience may already know this, but one of the cool things that I like about working with you, dealing with you, and conversing with you is that, well, you and I met at an NAB show back in 2000, right after the whole Y2K thing that didn't do much.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
And we met in Las Vegas, and you were fairly new working at Telos Omnia Axia, or actually Telos Omnia as it was known then. Axia name hadn't appeared yet, had it?
Yeah, it sure hadn't. That was 1999. I think I started at Telos Omnia.
There you go. And so we've known each other a long time. There was a good period of time at Telos when you, I don't know if you were ever my direct boss. I usually, reported to somebody else, but for some time you were in charge of the Axia product line, and then you served as CEO for a while, and then or now you're with Angry Audio, your own company, Angry Audio, where you make a lot of products that's very much needed by radio stations. But before all this, you had a history with audio consoles. You want to give us a quick mention about your experience prior to Telos?
You bet. I started out in audio with a musical instrument company named Carvin, and so this is oh my gosh, I don't even remember how long ago this was, and I was also doing some hot rodding of recording studio consoles around the San Diego and Southern California area, and so I had developed a bit of a reputation for hot rodding consoles, and I think it was Jack Williams at PR&E who heard about this kid that was hot rodding consoles, and I didn't meet him at the time, but he went to a recording studio that I had refitted, and I guess he was impressed enough that they called me in to interview and offer me a job at PR&E. And I'll remember now, and I think this is just kind of funny because I've designed so many radio broadcast consoles through the years. My first radio broadcast console that I ever saw was on the factory floor of PR&E. And I said, so radio stations use these, huh? So that's my background. Yeah.
Wow. We could probably do a whole show on, what makes a recording console and what makes a radio console and what makes a production console in a radio station and what makes a TV console, because I'm guessing you're pretty familiar with the different feature sets required in each of these applications.
I am. There are many similarities, and then there are many unique differences that make them special. I think that a radio console in particular can be very complex, but it has to look very simple because it's doing live work and you can't afford to make mistakes. So generally it's really, everything is automated and pared down so that people won't be confused and push the wrong buttons and that sort of thing. But it kind of deceives you because you might look at a radio console and think, oh, well, that's just really simple. And it might not be. There might be quite a lot going on under the hood.
Gotcha. Well, this show today happened because I was talking to Catfish about being a guest on the show and doing some more shows together, and he said, "Why don't we talk about the history of audio over IP? How that came to be?" And I thought, well, let's even title the show something like "How the Audio Got into IP." So that's what we're going to talk about. Catfish was there for a lot of the beginning of it, certainly the beginning of designing audio consoles to work with audio over IP. But I'm interested in some of the standards and what were some of the challenges. Where did people in the development area stub their toe? Where did they have aha moments? So we're going to get to that in just a minute. Our show This Week in Radio Tech with Michael Catfish Dosch is brought to you in part by our friends at AIR.com, AIIR.com, and they have a streaming service available. If you're not streaming, you need to be, and if you're paying way too much for streaming, maybe you need to pay less. Let's hear from Ricky Lee.
Hey, it's Kirk Harnack, and I'm here with Ricky Lee, the CEO of AIR. Ricky, you guys make a fantastic automation system, but streaming is a really big deal. Tell me about streaming with AIR.
It really is. We've got a beautiful streaming platform with an incredible dashboard with fantastic analytics. And you can buy it for just $20 a month. All you can eat. No limits on bandwidth or bit rates. And you can also record shows as well. So if you like to deliver on-demand content for $20 a month, you can stream and deliver that on-demand content to an RSS feed that can feed your radio player, your mobile apps, or a podcast that people can download and enjoy.
Now, $20 a month, that must be for just some slow MP3, right?
No, MP3, AAC, and we also now support HLS, which is big in the industry right now.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. How do I start to explore or find out more about streaming through AIR?
You go to air.com, AIIR.com/streaming, and from there, with a credit card, you can sign up and get started.
Really appreciate AIR.com sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And they also make the Playout One automation playout system for radio, and it works fantastically. It works a treat, as they say in England. The web voice tracking is particularly amazing with Playout One. Thanks a lot, AIR.com and Ricky Lee, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. Kirk Harnack here in the Telos Alliance studio in Nashville, Tennessee. Mike Dosch, Catfish, is our guest. We're going to jump right into some of the history of audio over IP. Catfish, one thing I'm not a little confused about. How did you end up getting hired, collaborating with Steve Church and others? And I think that's, if you tell that story, I'm going to probably get the answer to some other questions along the way.
Yeah, it's possible. So, when I left PR&E, I had called a few people in the industry. I thought I was going to do some marketing consulting, and I called Steve. He and I were old friends. We had done a bunch of trade shows together around the world. And when I called him, he had a very interesting response. He said, "You're not at PR&E anymore? Oh, I'll come and meet you." And he came the next day. He flew out to California, and I picked him up at the airport, and we went and ate Thai food and talked all day. And so he admitted during that meeting, he said, "I have always wanted to have a Telos console." And the reason for that is because it's right there in the middle of the studio, and I want the Telos logo right there in the middle of the studio where everyone can see it. And I thought, well, okay, we could do that. I know how to make consoles, and so that's kind of how we got started. Although he had kind of an ulterior motive as well, and that was that he had been working very hard for an extended period of time building Telos, and he wanted a vacation. In fact, he wanted more than a vacation. He wanted a sabbatical. And so he said, well, you come and make consoles. Oh, and by the way, you need to run the company while I go take a sabbatical. And so that's what we did. I moved to Cleveland, and he disappeared, and he never came back. Tell you the truth, he just, he landed he was in South America, and then he was in Europe, and I'd see him at trade shows, and he gave me a mission when he left. He said two things. He said, don't lose too much money, and have fun. Those were my two commands from the owner. Don't lose too much money, and have fun. So we didn't lose too much money, and I did have a good time. And after a year or so of that, we started working on consoles. And so I had a vision. In fact, this is probably why Steve wanted me to come. My vision for consoles at the time was we need to change the way consoles do their business. We need to stop treating the computer as this separate thing and treat it as an integrated component of the audio system. In fact, most audio, even at this point in the late 90s, was being sourced by the automation system. So what I thought was, let's get rid of sound cards, and let's have the computer speak digital audio directly into the mixing core of the console. And look at all the stuff we'll eliminate if we do that. We're going to get rid of sound cards and USB interfaces and all of that kind of stuff. But that's not even the expensive part. You got to plug all that stuff into something. Okay, so we would be getting rid of all the input cards and modules and everything else in order to get audio from the automation system into the console at that point. And that big digital pipe, I imagine, was going to be FireWire, which was kind of a thing at the time. It was kind of like super USB.
Right,
and
right.
It was kind of taking off in recording studios. And it looked to me like the only tech that was really suitable for doing this job. And so that was kind of where that all started. And I remember when Livewire was born. Some people give me credit for this, but this is just wrong, because this was not my idea. Okay, my idea was we're going to connect the digital console together with the computer system using FireWire or something like it.
Yeah.
And so we were at an NAB show, and Steve walks up to me, and he's got a cut sheet from Cisco, and it's a switch. It's one of those VoIP switches. And he says, Mike, it's not FireWire, it's Ethernet. And I said, no, here's my response. This is the visionary I was, okay? I said, Ethernet, I can't even make the printer print reliably. Right, I'm not going to put the audio for a studio on Ethernet, Steve. That's just not going to happen. And so the kicking and screaming began at that point. But he was right. The insight that he had was just brilliant. It was another Steve Churchism, because he did the same thing with ISDN, where he saw MP3, the capability of MP3, and he matched it to the capability of ISDN and said, if we bond these two together, we're going to make a super product. And he had the same insight. He said, if we use the real-time capabilities and the filtering and the multicast, all of these functions that are already available inside of the Cisco switch for VoIP, and we use it for studio audio, wow, that would really work. That would really be great. And so that was where Livewire began.
I got to ask you a couple questions here, because you hit upon something that moves how our brains think about different technologies, and it has so much to do with the implementation, and whether it's a consumer level implementation that doesn't freaking matter, and proper attention is not paid to it. Well, FireWire was a point to point, not point to multi-point, right? Cable here, cable there, and you hook two things together with FireWire, generally,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And it was used for all kinds of high-end, even in the audio business, high-end external devices could connect with FireWire, right?
Video and audio. Yep.
But it wasn't routable, and it wasn't manageable outside of the context of this point-to-point connection, right?
That wasn't my vision. My vision was we get it into the console, we marry the computer and the console together,
Right?
and so now this is a system, and then we take the output of the console, we send it on its way, just as we always have. And moving into IP changed everything.
Then your experience with Ethernet was not so different than everybody else's experiences. When I started demonstrating that Axia stuff worked, that audio over IP worked, people's hands would go up. Engineers would say, that'll never work. Think about all the printers that don't work, at the radio station. They had the same objection that you did. And this wasn't because of Ethernet. This was typically because of poor, cheap, cheesy, consumerish implementations of print drivers, maybe a lack of standards, maybe not adherence to standards. Because, nowadays printers, at least at my house, tend to work pretty well. At the radio station, they tend to work pretty well. But back then, I hit print, 5 times and nothing happened.
I have to admit, I still have trouble sometimes. But not with audio. Audio just makes it now. But I still have a hard time getting the printer to work right.
But the Ethernet part of that, that's I'm not saying it's always been perfect, but when Cisco puts their mind to developing something that meets a bunch of standards and works well, that's a reliability experience that you or I had never had up until that point, right?
I think so, and I think your insight is right. A lot of something doesn't work right, or something doesn't work the way you expect it to, and you blame the technology. And it might not be the technology. It might be you went and bought a D-Link router, and you've got gigabits of data you're trying to shove through the thing, and it's not made for it. And it's you're thinking it's an Ethernet problem, and it's really just a system design problem. But yeah, that's what we had to deal with. And Kirk, you'll remember, you and I both ate a lot of airplane food during the early days of Axia. I used to tease you. I used to say, Kirk will sell Axia to anybody who will fog a mirror.
Fog a mirror.
Yeah, and you would. You were out there all the time because you were a zealot. Once you figured out what Ethernet could do and what Axia was doing, you were out there, just like arguing with people. You'd argue them into sales. Yeah.
I was hired to be an evangelist, and I became a zealot. You're exactly right.
You were, you were great, but it was hard. It was really hard. I remember. I was just going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
You go ahead. Okay, I was going to say. I remember a conversation with a very high-end executive, and I won't mention his name here because everybody knows him. But we were talking at NAB about Axia and IP. And he said, this is brilliant. This is genius. This is absolutely the way it should be done. And I am so impressed with this. And I said, so we'll be expecting orders from you. And he said, over my dead body. That was his response. So he got the tech. He understood what we were doing and everything else, but it scared him to death.
And now everything we do is over Ethernet. And most of it, nowadays, even consumer stuff tends to work.
Yes, that's true. Yeah,
it tends to work, and if you pay attention professionally, it can work really, really well. Every day, billions of dollars in stock trades go over Ethernet. It's serious technology. Okay, I got a clarification. You mentioned Steve talking to you about a console that had the Telos name on it, and of course, Steve Church, the founder of Telos, wanted to get the branding in front of people, and not just over on a telephone hybrid or a codec somewhere off in the corner in the rack room. So which came first, the console idea or the audio over IP idea?
The console, I think. We had the very first Telos console, and it was a Telos console, was the SmartSurface. Mm-hmm. And the SmartSurface was designed to be a control surface for a few of these TDM engines that were out there. We had a couple of partner companies. One in particular was, I think they were called CCA, Greg Dean's company.
Computer Concepts.
Yes, Computer Concepts. And he was making an engine. And at the time, this was kind of the tech that everyone was using. It was TDM mainframe kind of thing. So we were going to make a console that would work with that. And that was independent and parallel with what we were doing with IP. And so we started out with a Telos console, and then we were going to have Telos Livewire products. And then we decided that we were going to name it differently. We were going to give it its own brand. And, so ultimately, Steve didn't get Telos consoles in radio stations, but he really did get Telos consoles in radio stations. So.
All right, so I've got some tech questions coming up. We got to take a quick break. We're going to find out what Catfish can tell us about some of the things that make audio over IP work. One of them is you got to have some kind of clocking system, and you don't have to have an advertising system, but by golly, it sure helps. And that's something that was part of the Livewire world from the very beginning. So we'll get that story and understand that, because man, we use both of those things every day when we connect up audio over IP systems. It's Kirk Harnack here in Nashville, Tennessee. Catfish, Mike Dosch is with us also from Angry Audio, and we're talking about the early days of audio over IP and how some of these things came to be. Our show is brought to you in part by Broadcast Bionics. Bionics.co.uk is their website, and I want to tell you about a product that is just naturally, of course, it's built all around audio over IP. If it weren't for AoIP, the thing I'm going to tell you about could not exist and would not exist, and that's the virtual rack. Virtual rack from Broadcast Bionics. And this is brilliant because, so many things that happen in a computer environment, in a data center, for example. Not just so many things. These days, practically everything in a data center is running in containerized software. And I know I've told the story before of how I was playing putt-putt golf a couple of summers ago, and I happened to chat with the guy behind me, and he was talking about, I found out he runs a data center in Middle Tennessee for a huge healthcare company. And I said, our company's doing some things with these containers, these software containers. And he said, I said, do you use those in your data center? He says, that's all we have. Everything is Docker containers now, everything. And that gave me even more confidence that what we're doing is the right thing here. So software infrastructure, whether it's audio consoles or phone systems, intercom systems, codecs, all in containers. And here you see products from different companies in the broadcasting world, like Ferncast, Telos Alliance, Sound 4, and 2WCOM. The problem with containers is they're kind of specialized in the technology. You've got to be a really good IT person who's got experience with them, and containers doing audio jobs need to very much run in a real-time kind of way. We can't have delays going on. We got to service this audio practically every millisecond. So designing a system that's easy to do, it takes a little bit of a trick. And the folks at Broadcast Bionics have done exactly that. They have built a server that has like an app store in it, and you turn the server on, you browse into it, and you're presented with an app store, and you pick out the applications that you want to install on your virtual rack. It won't let you over-install things. In other words, it won't let you try to do more things than the CPU and the RAM is capable of. And it keeps track of that for you. So you can install some audio consoles. You can install some audio processing. You can install codecs from 2WCOM or from Sound 4 and mic processing, all that kind of stuff. And you can install them, and voila, in just a couple of minutes, they're downloaded and properly installed with all the internal connection points that need to happen for running your network inside of this containerized world. You can also do failover, so you can get a couple of these virtual racks and they can back each other up. And once you've installed them, well, you still need to license the product from its respective manufacturer, of course. But some of these products do work in a demo mode right out of the box without licensing. So the point is that Broadcast Bionics has made this so easy to do. They make you and me feel like just a genius and a wizard for installing this and making it work. And it's great technology. And thank you so much for Broadcast Bionics to make this available for, the masses of engineers like me. I don't know all about Docker technology, and I'd have a hard time making that work myself. But the folks at Broadcast Bionics make it easy. Check it out, bionics.co.uk. And on that webpage that you saw, there are some videos at the bottom. You can watch Dan McQuillan explain how all this works. Thanks so much, Broadcast Bionics, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right. Mike Dosch, Catfish, is our guest, and we're talking about audio over IP. Mike, do you remember what it was like the first time that you saw this work and went, yeah, wow, that's clean audio, and it's like almost no delay, and it's fantastic. Do you remember that moment?
Yes, it was at a university in Latvia. We had a development partnership with the mathematics department of the university in Riga, and so it was a combination of Telos engineers and these Riga engineers, and some of them were really interesting guys that had a background in developing Soviet spy type technology. So these were really interesting guys with really interesting stories, and the first time I saw it, I was just blown away. Just absolutely blown away. Had to look and check all the connections to make sure they weren't trying to trick me. There's no sound card in here somewhere, is there? Nope, not a bit. So it was a thing of beauty.
One of the early misconceptions that I had to get rid of in my head about audio over IP, because this was a new concept. We all were familiar with streaming audio, MP3 audio. We as engineers, we got that. And most everyone, including myself, that I showed this technology to, we all assumed that it was coded audio running over networks, and then it had to encode and decode, and you would lose something in the process. And then finally, Catfish, I figured out a way to explain what's happening here to dispel the myth that this was somehow coded audio, since that's what we were all so accustomed to. I had to tell people this is linear audio, and basically the same ones and zeros that come off of the hard drive in the playout computer, playing back audio, those same ones and zeros, except for maybe a level change, if you give it a level change, those same ones and zeros travel through the Ethernet, show up at the other end, and get turned back into audio. It's a linear process.
Yes,
is that a reasonable explanation?
Sure. If it helps you understand it, it's a reasonable explanation. There was an early point in the Livewire story in which we were. Let me say it this way: we didn't set out to build this standard. That wasn't our goal. We actually said, "Hey, Ethernet audio would be really cool. Let's go survey the landscape." And so we were looking at other technologies. CobraNet was one of them, and honestly, we really wanted CobraNet to work. We really did. We kind of said, "Hey, this from the outside looks like it would do the job." And unfortunately, when we started looking closely at it, we realized there were a few limitations that were going to challenge us in broadcasting. And so we decided someone's got to do this. And so early on, we kind of started out by saying we'll do something similar to CobraNet at the transport layer, at layer 2. And then very quickly during that process, I think it might have been Steve who said, "You know what, we really need to just make this IP because it solves a whole bunch of problems." And it was absolutely the right move. So I still believe that we were probably the first people to build an IP system, a studio audio system that was IP based. I may be mistaken. If we weren't the first, we were one of the early ones. And some of the requirements that we gave ourselves were pretty hard. We had a requirement that end-to-end latency we mic to headphone latency, similar to what I'm doing right now. I have a microphone that's going through a digital audio system, and I'm listening to it. And we said that round trip from mouth to ears needed to be less than 3 milliseconds, because as soon as we introduce more latency into that process, it starts to affect the talent. You can start hearing a comb filter effect with a little bit of delay. Once you get between 5 and 10 milliseconds, you start hearing this phasing kind of thing going on between the bone conduction and what's coming through your ears. And then above 10 milliseconds, you start getting double talk. And it can be very, very disconcerting. And so, that was one of the most difficult challenges. Was we need to be able to do all of this very quickly. And oh, by the way, analog to digital converters and digital to analog converters, they account for a big chunk of that right there. So, it's not like we had all kinds of, 3 milliseconds. Gosh, look at all the, that's like a week in computer time. So look at all the time we have. Well, it was like, we only had half of that to work with because the converters took half of that. And so our first engine, I think it did the mixing process in 250 microseconds. It's a real-time Linux engine. Yeah, it was just crazy. Some of the stuff we were doing. I mean, we were playing with, we were using Intel processors, and NICs, basically Intel NICs, and we were working at the metal layer at that point to get the speed to where we wanted it to be. So
to get the packet processing to occur quickly.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. I think we moved mostly beyond that. I haven't kept up with what Telos has done recently. I mean, the tech continues to march on, of course, but I remember those early days, we had some real challenges making all this stuff work. And then, another challenge was my demand that this stuff be rock solid reliable. And, we had a lot of heated discussions about that. It'd be, I don't want to build a console that kind of sort of works and has all kinds of science experiment issues. And no, we're not shipping it until it's absolutely rock solid. You can't break it. And so engineers don't like to hear that. It's like, well, it's ready. No, it's not ready. It's not perfect yet. So there was an awful lot of that. But you have to understand, we were trying to launch a console division into a marketplace that wasn't looking for another console company. Okay. So, it's not like there were a bunch of people sitting around saying, gee, I wish Telos would make consoles. No, everyone had their console choices and they were good ones. We had good competitors that were doing a good job. So if we were going to go in, the tech had to be right. And the application, the consoles themselves, they had to be perfect. And so it was quite a harrowing ordeal to make that happen. I think Steve mentioned at one point that we probably had about $5 million invested in putting Axia together.
You mentioned that the world wasn't looking for another. The world wasn't looking for another console company. I guess I understand that. What I found out in showing the technology to engineers is that engineers didn't realize that there were benefits in getting rid of walls of punch blocks and being able to route audio with a few typewritten instructions or punching a button on a panel on a computer, that this was all possible and reliable because they had spent decades sitting on a turned upside down 5-gallon bucket punching punch blocks to make things happen. And then, yes, we went to routers. We had TDM routers, which were expensive and one-off in terms of design for a small niche industry, ours, whereas by moving into IP, as long as we could make that work, you got the benefit of this enormous industry that stamps out, more switches in a week than the broadcast industry would ever use.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, a $3,000 Cisco switch, that little box full of technology is something else, and it would cost you $50,000 to build it if you were, kind of building it the usual way using TDM technology. So yeah, it was quite a thing. You also mentioned synchronization, which is that also is an interesting story and subject of a patent, because early on we were trying to figure out how to synchronize all these packets. And you mentioned that it's real time, and I mentioned that it's low latency. Okay, so we've got a challenge here now, and that is we can't have big buffers to fix problems. So we need absolute perfect synchronization between the devices, and so that perfect synchronization these days is PTP, And but that didn't exist at the time. It was invented later on to actually give us this real time capability of media transport. But at the time, we didn't have that, and so Greg Shea, one of the Telos engineers, and Steve Church invented the original Livewire clocking scheme, and it was really cool. It really worked well. And of course, as the tech marched on, we ended up with IEEE 1588 clocks, PTP clocks. So that all the new stuff uses the more mature clocks. But back in the day, we were really pioneering. We were, I look at it. 10 years later, I was looking at it saying, man, I wish we'd had those chips back in the early days. That would have saved us so much trouble.
You're right.
So people come along later and they make IP audio products and they say, hey, look, we did this. And it's like, well, yeah, you did it the easy way. You did it with chips that I sure wish I had back in the day. So.
In the world of analog audio, you don't have to clock things, but remind us why it's imperative that a device that's creating frames or packets or samples, why it's imperative that a device that's creating them and sending them have exactly the same number of them per second or per minute that the receiving device wants to have. Why is that critical?
Well, if they got out of sync, you'd start getting audio dropouts or something called sample slipping, which is kind of a little different thing. Might not sound like a dropout, but it sounds weird. Or you might even get, if your clocks drift, you might even get a tone shift. So something that should have been here, 1 kilohertz ends up at 900 hertz, because the clocks are not the same in terms of playback. So yeah, it's absolutely critical that these clocks are synchronized. And again, PTP, Precision Time Protocol, is the way we all do it now in the industry, including Telos. But we had kind of the Livewire clock, I think, is what we called it back in the early day, and it was it was kind of a crude, and I shouldn't say crude. It was actually genius. It involved a phase lock loop, and the devices could kind of negotiate with each other and decide who's going to be master and who's going to be slave. There was a lot of really clever stuff that went into the early Axios stuff, but PTP, that's the way we do it now, and it's not negotiable. This is one of those hard rules of digital audio. The clocks have to be synchronized.
This is, in fact, the challenge of making a clock work over an Ethernet network or any communication scheme that's a little bit jittery is the precision required by the devices is way higher than the precision allowed by the transmission medium. So we're trying to synchronize clocks in different pieces of equipment to a very, very high precise standard over a network that's jittery by comparison.
Yeah, that can be an issue, and the way that can be addressed is using things like source side and destination side. What is this satellite GPS? You can use GPS to synchronize your clocks.
Yeah,
and do things of that nature. Yeah,
and so if you're like, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, there's just a whole universe of really cool clocking products now that I would have killed for back in 2000. It just didn't exist, and so we were pioneers.
Let's go back and cover a little tiny piece of technology in figuring out how to make audio over IP. How to make that low latency, as low as we could. And you may want to explain that, we came up with a live stream, which was very low latency, as low as we really could do. And then we had a more of a standard stream that was kind of a normal latency when you didn't have to hear yourself, through a loop. But we traditionally in IP, anything, we fit the maximum amount of data into a packet so that the ratio of usable data to the header information that has to be there in every packet to describe the packet, where it's from, where it's going, how important it is, things like that. We try to stuff the packets full. And that's why you often see in a router or a switch, you see an MTU, maximum transmission unit, figure of about 1,500 bytes. But we discovered in audio over IP to reduce latency, well, stuffing the packets as full as they could be was exactly the problem. Can you tell us about what we discovered about how to make these packets fly either faster or more frequently?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, if you're looking for efficiency, you want to have, all the data, big data, one tiny header. And because what you're trying to do is you're trying to reduce the proportion of header to data. You want as little header data or as little header information and as much data as possible. That's the most efficient way. And but let's imagine that you had 10 seconds of audio, for example, in a packet, and so you send it, and the receiver ingests it. It takes 10 seconds to ingest, and then it plays. Okay, well, that's 10 seconds of latency right there. And so that's a big problem. So what we did was we went the other direction. Said, how small can you make a packet? And the answer we came up with at the time, and this has changed a little bit, and then the state of the art has changed a little bit, but at the time we said we want our what we called live streams. We want those to be 6 samples per packet, and so that's an awful lot of headers. Because we're running at 48 kilohertz, so that's 48,000 divided by 6. Help me out here. What is that? 800, I don't know, 8,000 packets, something like that. And yeah, that's right, 8,000 packets of information per second. That's quite a lot of information that's flowing through your switch. But that was what we needed in order to get the low latency. And now if you think about the same problem, the packet shows up, it gets ingested by the receiver, and then it starts playing. The worst case, or I guess the best case scenario there is it starts playing 6 samples after it started.
Right.
So that's, fraction, very, very tiny fraction of a second. And then we introduced some other packet sizes because not everything needs to be live. And so, this idea I was talking about earlier where we have microphone to headphone latency and we want that to be very low. Let's say you're playing something back from your automation system. Do you really care if it took an extra 10 milliseconds to get there? Of course not. So we introduced multiple packet types. We had what we call live streams. Those were 6 samples per packet. And then we had standard streams, which I think were 240 samples per packet, something like that, 10 milliseconds, somewhere in there. And then later on, we ended up with some medium streams, which turned out to be kind of part of the AES 67 standard. And that was 1 millisecond packets. If you look around the audio, the Ethernet audio or the AoIP audio universe these days, you'll see 1 millisecond packets very commonly. I'm not going to say it's the only standard. There are dozens of different ways of doing this, but 1 millisecond comes up very often because it's kind of a nice compromise between it's not so small that it's totally inefficient, and it's not so big that it's got a lot of latency. It's basically 1 millisecond of data, and 1 millisecond of data means 1,000 times a second I'm sending information, and 1,000 times is better than 8,000 times sometimes.
Well, I was doing some calculations. I think that the Livewire live stream settled in at about 4,000 packets per second, whereas the standard stream is about 200 packets per second. And 200 packets per second, 150 to 200, that kind of range, that's real common for streaming audio. Even if it's MP3 audio, you end up with somewhere in the range of 100 to 200 packets every second with that kind of audio. But when you're doing with standard streams, which do have some latency, and as you said, if it plays out of a satellite receiver, which has already been to space and back, or if it plays out of an automation system with a little bit of extra latency, who cares? Doesn't matter as long as you hit the start button and it starts, before you can really think about it. then that's fine. But your mic to headphone, when you're talking live, you can't afford to have those delays. That's got to be very, very low delay. And I was also thinking about when you have 4,000 packets a second times 60 seconds is almost 250,000 packets every minute. And that's another reason why you need these devices to be synchronized so that that each one of them is making 4,000 packets a second and expecting and decoding 4,000 packets a second. Because if one of them's different, then that's a problem. And that's why these systems have to be synchronized.
That's right.
We're talking to Mike.
Go
ahead.
Well, no, it's your show. You go ahead.
You're actually coming up because we're going to do an advertisement, a sponsor message about Angry Audio. And tell you what, you're going to be up. You got a minute to think about it, Mike Dosch. Okay. This will be your time to shine and explain something that's really cool to our audience. So that'll be coming up in just a minute. Our show is brought to you in part by Max Connect, and a product that Max Connect has just come out with is called the Max Connect RMT 416, the RMT 416. Companies everywhere are increasingly occupying smaller physical spaces while they need to rely more on automated monitoring and alerting. And a lot of publicly traded companies must navigate compliance issues of proving performance of their radio stations or publicly owned radio stations. And in an effort to meet those needs, whether you're a big publicly owned company or whether you're got stations like I do where we need to listen to them and see what's going on, Max Connect has partnered with Audio Science to bring you the RMT 416. It's a streaming radio multi-tuner. It's a single rack unit housing its power supply and network connection. And then there are 4 slots to house your user option tuner cards. Each tuner card has 4 tuners with analog audio for each tuner on an RJ45 connector. How about that, Catfish? And when fully populated with 4 tuner cards, you host 16 individual tuners in one rack space. And you can get these tuner modules for AM, FM weather band. That's one that's available. You can also get AM, FM plus AM HD and FM HD. So you can tune your HD stations. You get a separate antenna input for whichever kind that you use, for the appropriate kind of antenna for AM or for FM VHF. That would be another kind. Of course, you can listen from anywhere, and you can also set up SNMP monitoring so that you can know about things like, hey, is my station on the air? Is my HD on but it's silent? Is my station on but it's silent? Or is my station off altogether? How are these things doing? And it also has IceCast built into it. So you got mount point settings for IceCast. It's shipping now. It's available now, and it's really, really cool, especially for these multi-station clusters where you need to keep tabs on what's going on there. Somebody does. Man, I mean, how many times have we been told your station's been off the air for hours? Oh my goodness, it sure has been. Well, Max Connect has partnered up with Audio Science to fix that problem for you. Check it out if you would at maxconnect.com. Oh, there's some great graphs from monitoring all this kind of stuff. Thank you, Suncast, for putting that on screen. maxconnect.com. We'll have a link in the show notes. All right. Our show is also brought to you in part by Angry Audio. Don't get mad, get angry. You don't even have to get even, just get angry. And Mike Dosch is here to talk about some amazing product. Mike, I use these in all my studios.
I think our friend Chris Tarr actually coined that phrase. Don't get mad, get angry. It's not us.
Oh, okay.
So, but I liked it so much. It's like, wow, that's charming. Customers are making up taglines for us. So, yeah, that was pretty cool. So, I'll talk to you today a bit about our microphone processors. Last time we were on your show, we had Cornelius Gould, who's our processing guru. And he has this line of processing algorithms called Chameleon. And so we kind of wrap Angry Audio hardware around his software, and we make these audio processors. They're specialty audio processors. And one of the products I'm speaking through it right now, it's called Smooth. And Smooth is a microphone processor that's optimized for the Shure SM7 or the Shure SM5. Guess you could use a 57 or a 58. They all pretty much use the same element. And this is kind of a unique approach to mic processing because when you plug in your microphone, it just sounds right. It's, you don't sit there fiddling with your controls and trying to come up with a set of compromises that work for your microphone, because it's only designed to work with that one microphone. So Corny's able to anticipate that, and he says, okay, so I know exactly how I'm going to shape this and exactly how I'm going to have the compression curves and everything else to optimize the sound for that particular microphone. It's a different approach. It's not plug anything in here, it's plug in a Shure. And of course, as I tell you about this, you can notice that I'm not using a Shure microphone. So I'm breaking the rule. I'm actually using an Audio-Technica dynamic microphone. I asked Corny first, do you think this would be okay? And he said, yeah, it's kind of close. So if it sounds good, that's Corny. If it doesn't sound good, that's because, I haven't had Corny help me set it up yet. So, it's maybe if I'd plugged in an SM7, I'd be getting a better sound. I'm not sure. But we also have another product called the Rebel. And the Rebel is same idea, but it's optimized for the Electro Voice RE20, RE27, RE320. And so these are very popular dynamic voice microphones in radio studios, podcast studios, announce booths. And so we kind of aimed at those two and said, we're gonna make processing for these two microphones, and customers routinely ask us, well, what about this mic and what about that mic? So we're thinking, maybe there will be more at some point. And but we've done really well with this. This is a very, very popular product. People seem to like it a lot. And my favorite review is, and this kind of happens quite a bit. In fact, I'll tell you the Clark Novak story very quickly. It's pretty funny. He has an SM5. And so I sent him a Smooth, and he plugged it in. And he said, oh, it's just amazing. The most amazing mic processor I've ever heard. I'm not giving it back. And I said, well, okay, you keep it, but tell me what your settings are. Take a snapshot of your settings so I can tell other people how to set it up for an SM5. And he said, what settings? I said, did you take the front panel off? He said, oh, no. Is there stuff in there? So he takes the front panel off and notices that there's all these little trim adjustments and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, well, how about that? Well, I'm not touching those. So this actually happens quite a lot where people just plug it in and they say, oh my gosh, don't touch it, And I think that's probably my favorite review of all Chameleon products is they just work. And, so you're not messing with them. And so whenever that happens, I'm very happy. And I tip my hat to Cornelius, who's a genius. So there you go.
That's amazing. All right. Love it. Angry Audio. Michael, thank you for sponsoring the show. I certainly appreciate your trust in us to get the word out. And thank you, viewers, listeners, engineers, fellow engineers who check into the different products that we advertise here. I'm a user of basically everything that we advertise. So, yeah, love it. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate you. All right. Now, continuing to talk to Mike Dosch about the beginnings of audio over IP. There was a kind of a competing, kind of a not competing standard on the other side of the world, came out roughly the same time, called Dante. And they really focused on a little different marketplace than Livewire did at first. You want to tell us about what Dante did?
Yeah, they had a similar technology. I don't know if they had the same number of samples per packet or not, but it's at some point this tech is very similar, and in fact it's so similar that with a nudge in the right direction, you can actually make different competing protocols work together. And of course, that's AES-67, and I'm happy to talk to you about that if you wish. But the Dante tech came out. And then a little bit after that, the Ravenna tech came out. And I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but QSC, the PA, had a protocol, very similar. And so there was actually a number of people that were doing this because, well, it's a good idea. I don't know, once you see audio over Ethernet or audio over IP, you realize, wow, there's just an awful lot of interesting things I can do with this. It's a whole different universe now. You mentioned it earlier. You said it took a while for engineers to realize they didn't need those tech walls anymore. And I remember you getting cranky with an engineer It's probably not a story you want me to tell, but I remember you getting cranky with an engineer because he just, he wanted all this Axia stuff and he wanted to wire it all to the tech wall. And you were like, don't do it. This is crazy. Why are you doing this? You could spend all that money for stuff you don't need. And it was pretty funny. It was like, okay, somebody pulled Kirk off the customer, please.
Yeah. Well, I've been to a number of different people installing audio over IP. Of course, it was Axia because that's who I work for. But people installing audio over IP for the first time, and they were installing it at kind of as you expect they would, by following the traditions they had always done. So, we whether it's Axia making X nodes or whether it's Wheatstone making blades, you have these devices that have some ins and outs, and you wire them then over Ethernet to the core switch. And I saw people just stacking whole bunches of these I/O devices, in our case, nodes, stacking them in the rack and then wiring many wires, many feet of wire, analog or AES wire, over to where the X nodes were. And I said, dude, put an X node over there and wire the stuff in that rack to it, and put another X node over there, and your wires get a whole lot shorter. And then you run one wire that's long, and that's your Ethernet cable, over to your switch. And so it took engineers a while of stubbing their toe doing it the old way, the hard way, before they figured out that there was a nicer, easier, more neat way to get this done, because the nodes were relatively cheaper for hooking things up.
All I had to do was remind you of that story, and you get cranky again. Did you hear it? There you are. That's the wrong way. Why are you doing that?
Get passionate about. What I love about AoIP is that I'm part owner of 21 stations, and they all are AoIP. They're all Axia. And I can sit here in Nashville, Tennessee on this computer I'm using right now at this desk, and I can adjust, repath, reroute, even fix just about anything that needs to be fixed. Hey, Kirk, we got this new show from satellite and the level's always low. Oh, we can fix that. Hey, I'd like more bottom end on my mic processing when I do my talk show. Oh yeah, we can do that. So how's it sound now? So just as you, as an engineer, might adjust a phone system, might configure for a new employee, or, hey, I don't want my phone to go to my voicemail here anymore. I want it to forward to my cell phone. Oh, okay. I'll jump in remotely into the phone system and take care of that. Audio over IP allows that to happen.
Right.
Sounds like you're about to say something else. Go ahead.
No, I wasn't. I just had a bunch of people walk in the door, and I'm waiting for them to be quiet so I can finish this. Yeah, please, guys. Shh. Yeah, so that's all. The
other thing that allows this to happen, we had the ad earlier for virtual rack. It means you can take these different broadcast functions, and they don't have to live in their own box anymore. They can live in a generic box. Same code or similar code. It's got little differences around the edges, so it deals with a different processor or different I/O or a Dell server or a HP server. But that allows us to move in the same direction that the IT world moves in, which has traditionally always been good for us in broadcast, to move where the rest of technology is going.
Well, that was kind of always the benefit of IP audio, was that now we can borrow this tech that's already moving quickly, and it's advancing by leaps and bounds. We can use this tech in broadcasting, because if we try to build broadcast products from the ground up using unique technology, there's not so much we can do. But if we can repurpose Cisco switches, if we can repurpose Dell servers in your case, and this is huge. This is a way for us to focus on those bits that only we can do, which are the audio applications or the broadcast applications, and then let Cisco be good at what they're good at, and Dell be good at what they're good at, and we can make great products that way.
It also lets us put all these broadcast functions into a cloud environment or a data center where we don't have physical access to the equipment. You can't go to an Amazon Web Services data center and knock on the door and say, I need to put my Omnia 11 right there in the rack where we're renting some computers from you. You can't do that. But you can take code that is an audio processor and put it in the cloud and then send that out with a protocol like micro MPX and get beautiful FM stereo to your transmitter site over IP. So the fact that, and by the way, you said earlier, you mentioned audio over Ethernet, and then you said audio over IP. And I'm glad you said that, because that allows us a moment to make sure we compare the difference. There were audio over Ethernet standards, and they were not so useful, not much more useful in terms of their flexibility than, say, a point-to-point technology like FireWire. Whereas, because Ethernet is the cabling and maybe something to do with the endpoints, and they may be specialized. CobraNet and EtherSound, I believe, both needed specialized switches, and the technology, some of it only allowed audio to flow one way, and it had to be a bundle.
Yeah, I don't think they needed specialized switches. It was still Ethernet, but it was all working at layer 2. And so I think the limitation in this case might have been that because it wasn't actually IP, it was kind of limited. You know, it was kind of zone limited. So you might use this inside of a studio, but you couldn't really use it to connect via wide area network to someplace else. And because Livewire in this case really is, you know, it's just AoIP. It's a layer 3 standard. Then it can be conveyed over anything that can convey IP packets. And that was kind of a game changer for us, because now, you literally could, connect cities together using, MPLS and wide area networks and do things like that. And of course, you mentioned earlier that, well, at least in the case of Livewire, it was linear. It was uncompressed. But it doesn't have to be either. So, those packets can actually contain compressed data. They don't generally with Livewire, because Livewire is kind of known to be a linear standard, but they can go side by side along with compressed audio over the same links. And of course, that was something that we really wanted with Livewire. We didn't want the link, the Ethernet connection, to be completely owned by the audio device. We wanted to be able to convey other information over the same link. And so that's something you can do with Livewire. You can have, you could have compressed audio, for example, being sent right alongside uncompressed audio on the same link over the same switch to different destinations. And so, IP is magical. We can do so many interesting things once we get into that domain. And that was the shortcoming of, I guess you said EtherSound. I remember CobraNet. But those were the limitations. It was going to be, it would have worked fine for the local studio, but it would not have transported well outside the studio.
We're going to be out of time here in any minute. Catfish, we got one more quick commercial break, and then we have a tip of the day or tip of the week coming up from you, and I have my own quick tip of the week as well. But one thing that you impressed upon me very much about some of the genius of doing this over IP was we could also include GPIO. We could include, virtual contact closures right along with the audio, locked in with the audio's timing. And we can also use the same network to transmit title and artist information, all the information that is lost in a sound card, as you used to point out. When you use a sound card, all you get is the audio. The computer knows a lot more that it can't transmit, at least not over the same transmission scheme that's transmitting the audio. So the genius of doing this over IP lets us do everything else that we can do over IP.
I only want to say one more thing. Do you know when this started? Do you remember the year? I think it was about 2002, maybe, something like that, when we first introduced Livewire.
I thought the first NAB show we showed, it was 2004, but that was only the SmartSurface. We didn't have an engine yet. Yeah.
That could be.
By 2005, we were showing it.
Okay, so 2005. So that means 20 years later, it looks like it might not be a fad. Looks like it might actually stick. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what. Hang on for 120 seconds. We'll finish the show up in just a minute talking to Mike Dosch, the owner of Angry Audio, and he was right there in the middle of things when audio over IP started to become a thing 20 and 20 plus years ago. Our show is brought to you in part by our friends at Vox Pro, one of Jock's favorite accessories, tools in the studio. It's good for so many things more than just phone calls. Check it out here.
Hey, what's happening? St. John here, coming to you from Command Central, and wanted to tell you about the absolute best partner you can have in radio. I'm talking about, boom, Wheatstone's Vox Pro. Now, a lot of folks have used previous versions of Vox Pro, all awesome, but I want to tell you about some of my favorite new features in 7. And for folks who've never used Vox Pro before, I'm about to tell you why it's an absolute game changer and essential for really fast-paced multi-element radio. Lots of different audio software out there. Why Vox Pro? Because it was designed for radio. It's the only software designed to do what we needed to do, which is record, edit, playback in real time. When I say lightning fast, I'm going to show you how fast you can edit stuff up in Vox Pro right now. So literally 3 clicks on the controller, mark left, mark right, everything that gets marked, you hit delete, it goes away. It's literally that fast. So we're going to take this part right here. Boom. From caller 9 to him saying, I'm ready.
Ready for that secret sound.
Boom. All of that stuff, hit delete, it goes away. Here's your edit.
You are tackling secret sound caller 9.
I'm ready, St. John.
So one of the best features of version 7, this is awesome. It's effects macros, and you can literally put a chain of effects together so that instead of having to normalize a phone bit and then use noise reduction on it and EQ it and all that, you can literally build a chain. One button, this one's called call right here. I just click that. All of those processes happen instantaneously. Literally saves 80% of your editing and cleanup time. Final thing that I love about Vox Pro, and there's so much more to get into, but one of my favorite things, you can load it on a laptop. I've literally done my show from a hotel room in Armenia to the conference room at, this was fun, jury duty. Great thing, no one could tell the difference. Vox Pro makes it totally easy. Telling you, if you're looking for the best on-air partner, call my friends at Wheatstone, ask them about Vox Pro, and you will be glad you did.
And if you want your price on a Vox Pro, call Broadcasters General Store, BGS. Their website is bgs.cc, and they love to hear from you by phone. Remember that, the phone? You can call them at 622. Wait a minute. It's scrolled off the screen. Suncast, put it back on the screen. 352-622-7700. That's it. I just remembered it. 352-622-7700 for Broadcasters General Store. Check them out. They'll give you the lowest price possible. Love these guys at BGS. Talking to Mike Dosch, we got time for a tip of the week from Mike, and I might have a quick one too if he doesn't steal mine. Catfish, would you like to leave our viewers and listeners with a tip, something to take away from the show?
I got nothing. So I think what you ought to do is come up with one that's so amazing that it's like good enough for both of us. Okay. So,
you're very familiar with this, right?
I am.
Yeah. Steve Church and Skip Peasy wrote a book called Audio over IP Building Pro AoIP Systems with Livewire. And so, as we like to say, yes, we really did write the book on audio over IP.
They really did write the book.
But I look at this book every now and then, and you know what? Even from almost 20 years back, when was this thing published? Does anybody remember the date? I'm not
2010, 29, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So it's probably 15 years older. So most of the information is still absolutely relevant in here. The technical information, the things that engineers may want to know about. It's the Cisco switch model numbers have changed. The part numbers have changed, for various pieces of equipment. Here's a diagram, and these particular consoles are not made anymore, but there's still, thousands of them out there.
I drew that. That's my drawing that you just opened. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. My Livewire book, by the way, was signed by Steve, and what he wrote inside was so cool. He said, "From the Papa of Livewire to the Papa of Axia, we did it." I remember that with great fondness.
Well, obviously, I want our listeners to understand that Catfish and I are talking about Axia and Livewire, but we've also tried to mention that the technology of AoIP applicable with other brands as well, slightly different formats. And we didn't get to talk much about AES 67, but we have covered that very, very well on previous episodes of This Week in Radio Tech. So if you just do a Google search for This Week in Radio Tech and AES 67, you should find at least one and maybe several episodes where we cover that quite well. And that's where we got all the manufacturers, or several of them, together to say, okay, let's each change a little something about our system and make them all work together in a constructive and sensible way. And so that's been done. AES 67 is the glue that can tie different systems together. Catfish, people ask me, well, I'm going to build a studio with AES 67. So, well, that's great, but you really ought to pick a brand, because each brand has their own conveniences and niceties. And if you need to hook two different brands together, that's where you tie them together with AES 67.
I'm glad you didn't ask this earlier, because I would have gone off for 15 minutes on AES 67 and the stories that, it was really something to try to get a bunch of companies to agree on anything. But yeah, you don't want to build an AES 67 studio. You want to pick and I would say probably pick your console. That's probably the best way to do it. So if you want, if you want Wheatstone consoles, use Wheatnet. If you want Axia consoles, buy Axia. If you want Lavo consoles, buy Lavo. And what'll happen is you'll get the protocol, the native protocol, along with your console. And so it'll either be Wheatnet, Livewire, or Ravenna, respectively, for those three brands. And then use AES 67 to kind of add in products that may or may not be native to your system. So if you have a Livewire system and you want to connect to a Ravenna device, you can do that. Use AES 67 to do it. But, the idea of, well, I want an agnostic, network. You'd be giving up a lot to make such a choice. So I think your advice is good there. You should kind of pick your consoles and then take the protocol that comes with them, and then hook things up with AES 67. That's a good approach.
Good advice. Excellent. Catfish, Mike Dosch, the owner at Angry Audio, and I really appreciate you being with us today, Mike. Good to see you, and
it's my pleasure.
Hope to see you soon.
Yeah.
All right.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Big thanks to Suncast for producing today's show. Thanks very much, Suncast. Appreciate you very much. And we got to go. We will see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.